This is Matthew McConaughey.
Natalie Portman.
James Patterson.
Michael Ian Black.
And you are listening to
Five Questions
with Dan Schawbel.
Katherine, welcome to Five Questions.
Thank you so much for having me.
After balancing your film and modeling work with being a high school student, how did you know it was time to drop out, and how difficult of a choice was that to make?
It wasn't difficult at all. I was not a giant fan of schooling, but I was also a kid. So, I think a lot of our children feel that way and we have to force them to do it. My mother and father just felt that because I had, honestly, my brother, who is an incredibly educated person and who takes education very seriously, said to my parents, why would you force her to go to college to figure out a career path when she already has one and already knows what she wants to do? What's the purpose of that? So I think they kind of took that advice pretty, they respected it coming from my brother, who felt education is, really important, and let me leave school, which I'm grateful they did, because it wasn't for me.
That's amazing that your brother did that and stood up for you. And I feel like a lot of people, it's got to be rare, but maybe not as much in the entertainment space to figure out what you want to do. We just see a lot of people, hopping from one job to the next, trying to figure themselves out. And to know that early is just like a big advantage, especially in the media entertainment space, where I talk to so many people. I've talked to people who started their acting modeling career at 4 or 6 years old. It's a big advantage because you just go through a lot, and therefore those experiences tally up, and you have an advantage as you kind of get older.
It's the 10,000 hours thing, right? Where, we've started putting in those hours early. So by the time you're in your 20s and 30s, you've become a bit of an expert in your field, which feels really good. Because you're still young enough to really get out there and do it and give it your all. Now at 44, I'm exhausted and feel like I ought to retire. So, I've had the great career experience early and young enough to really have the energy and stamina to do it. And now I'm ready to, go to that next quieter phase of life in a way. But I watch my children. I have a 14-year-old now, and this is the time that those questions start popping up. What do I want to do with my life? And it's that time as a parent where you start saying, okay, you're about to enter high school next year. You got to start kind of thinking forward. And it's so hard for them. She's got 4 years of high school in front of her, but you kind of have to start preparing for the 4 years after. Do you want to go to college? Do you want to learn a trade? Do you want to specialize in something? Do you want to just, get out into the world and see where it takes you? What do you want to do? I never had to ask myself that. So I don't know how to ask it for them. It's weird.
Well, I'm sure they'll figure it out. And clearly you're not retiring. You have so many projects coming up. What can we learn about friendship based on the characters in your show, Firefly?
I think, I don't know that you're going to learn anything about friendship that you don't already know, but you are going to see a friendship that feels familiar and feels human and feels like an experience you can relate to, because any of us who have those kinds of friends, even if it's your family, even if it's your sister or your brother or somebody you've known and knows you deeply and for a very long time and has been through it all with you, there are inevitable ups and downs. There are those moments where you want to never speak to them again. And there are those moments where you cannot live without them. And to me, that feels very relatable and human.
Definitely. I mean, I think of my friends. I've had friends from middle school, and we're very, very different compared to some of the friends I've made more recently, obviously, because we made them because of kind of what we're into now. And just going through that time and some of the arguments, some of kind of figuring out who you are, them figuring out who they are, and hopefully, especially with some of my friends, we come back together and we're fine, and we build on what we have.
Yeah. And I think there's just this sort of inherent loyalty to when those relationships have lasted that long. You know that they've got your back and you've got theirs. And it's that kind of situation where it's like, well, I can say that about them, but you could never say that about them. Right. And
the cool thing for people in the entertainment world is a lot of them probably knew you before you got famous. So they're able to say things to you, whereas a fan probably wouldn't, right?
Well, certainly my friends and my family. Yeah.
Why did you decide to executive produce and portray Victoria Woodhull in your upcoming series, and what inspired you about her story?
Victoria Woodhull is just, when they first approached me about that and kind of sent me the material, I went, this can't be true. This woman could not have really existed, and no one talks about her. No one knows.
I didn't even know about her.
It is shocking to me that she has been essentially erased from history, because her story is wild and inspiring in many ways, but just wild in a lot of ways, and incredibly entertaining. So I thought, my God, this would be a hell of a character to take on and something really fun to do. The trick now is getting that project together. I mean, to me, Hollywood it is hard to get a project into real development and not just development hell. So
unless your movie or show has Batman in it or Spider-Man,
right, especially now, but that actually, on the flip side of that, because there is so many opportunity for material and content, there's so many outlets now for it. There are more opportunities to tell stories about women, which has been a real blessing at my age. But they're still particular about those stories.
And I feel like the timeliness is so perfect. I mean, you have a female vice president now, like the potential to have a female president in the future just seems very plausible.
Feels real now, right? Feels real.
So timing wise, I just feel like it's going to resonate. I mean, I'm definitely going to watch it. I'm very excited. And
awesome.
I feel like, my fiance will probably want to watch it too. Right. And I think that a lot of people will watch it maybe as a couple or as a family.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's the idea, is that this can be a very engaging, entertaining, human story for anybody. It's not specifically female driven. It's just a very interesting female story, and a very interesting historical figure. So people should read the book. My God, she's great.
And we're both dog lovers. You've been on a mission to help dogs through the Jason DeBus Heigl Foundation and Badlands Ranch. Why has this been so important to you, and what have you accomplished?
Well, it's been important. I think my family's always been animal people. I grew up with a lot of dogs, cats, parakeets. I think my brothers had a rat at one point. There were iguanas and hamsters. So we've always had that kind of animal connection and chaos. And then I want to say it was about, I have to look up the dates, but I think it was about 15 years ago, my mother had a sort of fortuitous experience where she became very aware of the companion pet overpopulation issue in Los Angeles city and county specifically, because that's where we were living. And she started writing checks and getting involved. And the more involved she got, and the more we started donating, the more we started feeling like, let's build our own foundation for her, of course, giving her son a legacy he couldn't give himself, and doing something for the voiceless and the innocent, which was very much my brother's vibe. But having some control over how that's, going to happen, right? If you're donating a lot out there to the big, the ASPCA, the HSUA, like all these big animal advocacy groups, you don't necessarily know exactly where your money is being used and how it's being used. And no disrespect to these organizations, they're incredible and what they do is incredible. But we had some very specific ideas about what we wanted the money used for. We feel very passionately about spay neuter. It's really the only way to stop the overpopulation of these animals. And we were able to fund a lot of those free spay neuter days in low income areas, because I think, quite frankly, if you have to make a choice about what you're going to, food on the table for your family or spaying and neutering your pet, you're going to choose food for your family. So if we can say, no problem, we'll help you with your pet, and take that burden away, people will do it. It's not people aren't adverse to spaying and neutering, that it's costly. And then a lot of transport programs of getting them out of these high kill shelters where they're not going to make it into low kill or no kill areas like New York. We've sent a lot of dogs to New York where they get rescued and into their forever homes. A lot to Utah, which has been great, to shelters that have room and they have a chance. And we've done really, I give a lot of the credit to my mother. She has really invested an incredible amount of time, energy, heart, soul, and money. A lot of money. My mother just in the last year has put in $1.4 million of her own money into this. And I feel like I don't typically like to talk about those kind of numbers, but I think it's important. I don't think people have any idea, what we're willing, that we put our money where our mouth is. We're not just asking other people to donate. We put it in, and she certainly put it in.
Yeah, that's really important. Well, it's amazing that you're having such a great impact. I mean, I had 4 dogs growing up and they're like little humans, and I definitely miss them.
Yeah, they're voiceless, they're innocent, and their only purpose in life, as far as I can see, is to love us and to give us this sort of unconditional love and loyalty. That's what, and they will, whether you give it back or not, which is what breaks my heart. And people who will take advantage of that or ignore it or be shameful about it, I have zero tolerance.
And there's a reason why if someone murders a dog in the film, it's very easy to get them to be the villain.
Oh, yeah.
Even more so if they murder a person. It's like babies and dogs. You don't want to go near those. Or if you're like a director, you're like, okay, let's turn this person into a villain right now. And then they just do that. And you're like, you hate them.
Straight up evil. No forgiveness.
It's the innocence. It's the innocence. I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
And what's your best piece of career advice?
Oh, just follow your passion. I'm just kidding. You're going to murder me. The best piece of career advice, prioritize, I think. For me, it was very difficult. And I think when you're young, it is difficult to know yourself well enough to know what am I willing to put my full attention, focus, and effort into. Sometimes you just are plowing forward without any real conscious thought. And then you wake up one day and you realize, oh my gosh, there are other things that I wish I had put more of a priority on or given more attention to. And if you don't know you, and you don't know what speaks to you, what about your career really moves you, other people are going to sway you. And suddenly you're doing things that don't feel right for you. So it's a hard thing to do when you're young. I would encourage you, though, to sit down and quietly make a list. And no judgment. There's no judgment of the list and what is your priority. And you could be 21 and venturing out after college and saying, family's not a priority for me right now. My career and my ambition is my priority. This is how I want it to look. This is how I want to pursue it. This is what I'm willing to sacrifice for it. This is what I'm not willing to sacrifice for it. So that you can have some clarity of your own vision and make it yours. Don't let anybody tell you what it should look like, what it should feel like, or what you should do for it.
That's great advice. And I especially agree. Like when you're younger, it's harder to say no because you have no work.
Yeah.
But as you get older, you should be, people should definitely be more selective about where they spend their time and more conscious of it. And I think naturally that happens, but you also have to set those boundaries. And a lot of the successful people I've talked to over the years, like they're very intentional with what they do. They don't just do it to do it. And because of that, it actually, even if they turn down projects, long-term, it helps them out more.
Exactly. And I think there's this great fear, especially in the, for me, at least as an actor, because one job ends, you are out of work. There's no guarantee that you're going to get another job. So you just feel like you got to take anything that comes your way, and everything that, you get an offer for, you're like, yes, I'll do it, whether it's you're right for it or not, whether it's the right story for you or not. And the problem is it could be a great story. I've certainly had my big bombs, and I wouldn't say that that it was a particularly awful movie or anything. I just wasn't it wasn't for me. It wasn't right for me, but I was trying to force myself, into a box that you can sense that people can sense that. And I imagine that applies to almost any career and any path. If you're trying to force yourself into something that doesn't suit you, it's never going to be great. It's never going to be your best work. So you got to be courageous enough to say no,
Absolutely.
Not well anyway.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This was fun.